But when I said Michael, you probably forgot it. You said, "I'd love that."
Yeah.
It's such a great name. You've worn it well.
You know that feeling when reality bends in a way your brain refuses to process? That's exactly what happened in a federal courtroom yesterday. Picture this. A man who spent over 5 decades building a legacy, whose voice echoed through millions of homes, standing in a place where music can't save him. Bill Gaither, the gospel music legend, collapsed right there in the courtroom as the judge prepared to read his sentence. Not a staged fall, but a genuine moment where his legs simply gave out. And before you think you know this story, let me tell you something that will change everything. This isn't just about one man's fall from grace. This is about the fragile line between faith and fraud, and what happens when the foundation people built their spiritual lives upon begins to crack. Here's what nobody is talking about. For 18 months, while investigations happened behind closed doors, Bill Gaither continued performing. He stood on stages across America, leading worship, moving crowds to tears with songs about redemption, all while prosecutors built a case painting him as the architect of one of the most elaborate financial schemes in gospel music history. Because what I'm about to reveal will make you question everything. Bill Gaither spent decades building his reputation, one performance at a time, earning the trust of a community that values integrity above everything else. The Gaither Vocal Band became a household name through consistent ministry, or at least, that's what everyone believed. He didn't just perform, he built an empire. The Gaither Homecoming series became a phenomenon, bringing together legendary gospel artists for concerts that felt like family reunions. People invested emotionally, brought their entire families, and donated money because they genuinely believed in the mission. This is the critical detail prosecutors are now using against him. According to the indictment, Gaither allegedly began diverting funds as early as 2008. This was sophisticated and calculated. Fans donated to what they believed were ministry outreach programs designed to spread the gospel. The donation forms used phrases like kingdom work and advancing the ministry. But, according to investigators, a significant portion never reached any ministry. Instead, the money was funneled through shell companies designed to obscure the paper trail. Companies were registered in Delaware and Nevada, with accounts established in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. When you set up accounts in countries known for banking secrecy while running a ministry, it raises red flags. Prosecutors brought in forensic accountants to trace every dollar. Over 15 years, approximately $63 million passed through Gaither's organizations. Of that, prosecutors allege that $27 million cannot be accounted for through legitimate expenses. $27 million. That's a systematic pattern representing one of the largest financial frauds in Christian ministry history. Former employees began coming forward, longtime ministry partners who genuinely loved him. One former financial manager testified that when she noticed discrepancies between what was reported to the board and what was actually happening, she was told she didn't understand the big picture of ministry finance. She was made to feel like her concerns were a sign of weak faith, as if trusting God meant not asking questions about millions of dollars. That's psychological manipulation, using spiritual language to silence legitimate oversight. A former tour manager provided even more damaging testimony. He described Gaither taking lavish European vacations and Caribbean resort stays, billing them to the ministry as outreach planning or international ministry development. On one occasion, Gaither spent 3 weeks in Italy with his family at luxury hotels and Michelin-starred restaurants, expensed as a missions research project. When the tour manager raised concerns about how donors might feel, he was allegedly told he was being judgmental and needed to trust God's provision. The defense argues everything Gaither did was legal, that every dollar can be accounted for. They claim offshore accounts were necessary for managing international royalties and music distribution. Many legitimate organizations use similar structures, They argue the $27 million wasn't missing but reinvested in ministry infrastructure, like recording equipment and tour operations that don't show up as traditional charitable expenses. The defense challenges former employees' testimony, suggesting they were either misunderstanding financial arrangements or seeking revenge after being terminated. They presented accountants who testified that Gaither's practices, while unorthodox, weren't illegal. One expert explained that in entertainment and ministry, personal and business expenses often blur, especially when someone is essentially the brand. But then came the game changer. Federal investigators revealed emails showing Gaither explicitly discussing how to structure transactions to avoid tax reporting requirements. In one exchange with his accountant, Gaither allegedly wrote, "We need to keep these donations below the reporting threshold. Split them across multiple accounts if necessary. The less the IRS sees, the better." That single email became the linchpin. When you have written evidence of someone deliberately hiding money from the government, that's conspiracy to commit tax fraud. Prosecutors also revealed Gaither purchased a multi-million-dollar Montana property, a sprawling ranch with private lake access and horse stables, using funds allegedly donated for ministry. The property was registered under a trust, listing Gaither's children as beneficiaries. Investigators traced the money through shell companies and discovered the initial funds came directly from donor contributions. The defense argued he intended to use it for ministry retreats, but prosecutors had a devastating rebuttal. In 3 years, not a single ministry event had been held there. It was used exclusively by Gaither's family. Behind all these financial details are real people whose lives have been turned upside down. Gloria Gaither, Bill's wife and partner for over 50 years, has been his most steadfast defender. She released a statement after the verdict. "I have stood beside this man through every season of our lives. I know his heart and his faith. The man portrayed in this courtroom is not the man I know. Yes, we made mistakes in how we handled finances. Perhaps we trusted the wrong advisors, but my husband is not a criminal. He got overwhelmed by the complexity of running a ministry that grew beyond what we ever imagined." You can hear the genuine love and loyalty, but also the uncertainty. Their son Ben has been vocal on social media, defending his father and claiming government overreach. He's pointed out that the IRS often targets religious organizations with scrutiny that other nonprofits don't face. He's questioned why, if these structures are illegal, dozens of other mega ministries using similar systems aren't being investigated. But Suzanne, their daughter, has remained conspicuously silent. No statements, no press conferences, no social media defense. That silence speaks volumes and has led to speculation about whether she's distancing herself because she knows something or simply processing the trauma. The fan reaction reveals how we process betrayal from idolized figures. Social media has become a battleground. Defenders argue that his lifetime of ministry work, his contributions to gospel music, the millions of lives he's touched, should count for something. They point out he's being judged by a secular legal system that doesn't understand ministry finance. Even if he made mistakes, it doesn't erase the good he's done. One viral post essentially said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." We're all sinners. The difference is Bill Gaither's sins are being examined under a microscope, while the rest of us get to hide ours. But then there are people who feel utterly betrayed. Folks who gave money they couldn't afford, who sacrificed family vacations, who delayed home repairs, who invested in Gaither's ministry because they believed it was going towards something eternal. Discovering their donations might have funded luxury lifestyles isn't just financial fraud, it's spiritual abuse. One woman shared how she and her husband gave $5,000 after hearing him speak about urgent missions needs. They had been saving for their daughter's wedding, but felt God calling them to give sacrificially. Learning that money might have gone toward a Montana ranch destroyed her ability to trust any Christian leader. That's the real cost. Not just money, but shattered faith. Gospel radio stations face an incredibly difficult decision about playing his music. The songs themselves haven't changed. Because He Lives is still powerful. Some stations continue playing the songs because it's about the gospel message, not Bill Gaither. But others have pulled every Gaither song, arguing that featuring him normalizes financial corruption. There's no right answer. And the debate reveals deeper questions about whether we can separate creation from creator. Inside the gospel music industry, the fallout has been seismic. Artists who collaborated with Gaither are scrambling to address this. Some have issued carefully worded statements. But here's what's interesting. Several insiders admit that rumors about Gaither's finances have circulated for years. People suspected something wasn't right, but nobody wanted to ask questions. In tight-knit communities where reputation is everything and challenging a beloved leader can get you blacklisted, there's enormous pressure to stay silent. Multiple sources report there were whispers at industry events, quiet conversations where people would say, "Have you heard about Bill's accounts?" But those whispers never became public scrutiny until federal investigators got involved. This brings up accountability in religious organizations. Unlike publicly traded companies with mandatory audits and strict oversight, many ministries operate with minimal accountability. Boards are often filled with family members or close friends more interested in protecting the leader than asking tough questions. Financial reporting requirements for religious nonprofits are shockingly lenient. The IRS doesn't require detailed disclosure like other nonprofits must provide. This creates an environment where someone could siphon off money with little risk, unless an insider blows the whistle. The Gaither case has prompted calls for reform and mandatory independent audits, but that faces resistance from those claiming government intrusion into religious freedom. Now, let's get to the moment everyone is talking about: the courtroom collapse. After weeks of testimony, after hundreds of documents, after both sides made their closing arguments, the moment arrived for Judge Harrison to announce the verdict. The courtroom was packed, standing room only, with journalists, family members, and supporters crammed into every available space. Bill Gaither sat at the defense table, his hands clasped in front of him, his face showing the strain of months of legal battle. Gloria sat directly behind him, her hand occasionally reaching out to touch his shoulder. The judge entered, and the room fell into that particular silence that only happens in courtrooms. Judge Harrison took his time, reviewing documents, making everyone wait. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, professional. He acknowledged Bill Gaither's contributions to music, his impact on the Christian community, the letters of support submitted on his behalf. For a brief moment, it seemed like there might be mercy. But then came the word that changed everything: guilty. The gasp that went through the courtroom was audible. But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. He continued, explaining that the evidence of systematic tax evasion, of deliberate attempts to hide income, of using donor funds for personal benefit, was simply overwhelming. He talked about the responsibility that comes with being a leader, about how people in positions of trust are held to higher standards. And then he announced the sentence: 5 years in federal prison, along with substantial financial penalties, restitution to the IRS, and forfeiture of assets tied to the illegal transactions. 5 years. That's 1,825 days away from family, away from music, away from everything that has defined Bill Gaither's existence. For a man in his late 70s, that's potentially a life sentence. And that's when it happened. Bill Gaither stood up, and his legs gave out. It was sudden, complete loss of bodily control. He collapsed straight down before anyone could react. For seconds, there was chaos. Gloria screamed. Bailiffs rushed forward. Attorneys bent down to help. Someone yelled for a doctor. The judge called for a recess as Bill Gaither lay on the courtroom floor, surrounded by people trying to help. Was it a heart attack? A stroke? Or simply stress so overwhelming that his body couldn't process it? Paramedics arrived, checking vitals, stabilizing him. He was conscious but disoriented, his breathing shallow. The courtroom was evacuated, journalists frantically typing. Within 15 minutes, Bill Gaither collapses in court after guilty verdict was trending everywhere. He was taken to a hospital for overnight observation. Medical reports indicated he experienced a severe vasovagal response, a stress-induced fainting episode that caused his blood pressure to drop. It wasn't life-threatening but serious enough for monitoring. Some supporters see this as evidence Gaither is too fragile for prison, that incarcerating him would be inhumane. His defense team filed motions requesting house arrest, citing health concerns. The prosecution has opposed this, arguing health issues don't absolve consequences and that federal prisons have medical facilities for elderly inmates. Beyond the legal maneuvering, that collapse has become symbolic of something much larger. It represents the complete destruction of a carefully constructed image, decades of reputation building crashing down. Some people see it and feel sympathy, viewing it as the tragic fall of a flawed but fundamentally good man. Others see it as justice, as inevitable consequence of arrogance and greed catching up with someone who thought they were above accountability. And still others wonder if there's something we're all missing. What happens next? Gaither's legal team has announced plans to appeal, arguing procedural errors, inadmissible evidence, and judicial bias. Appeals in federal cases can take years. Meanwhile, Gaither is out on bail subject to strict conditions. He can't leave the state, had to surrender his passport, wears an ankle monitor, and is prohibited from managing ministry finances. It's a living purgatory, free but not really free, waiting to find out if he'll spend his final years behind bars or if some technicality will give him a second chance. The gospel music world is trying to figure out what this means. Will there be reforms in how ministries handle finances? Will donors become more cautious and demanding of transparency? Or will people move on to the next big name, hoping this time will be different? History suggests these scandals happen regularly. Every few years, another prominent Christian leader is exposed for financial impropriety or abuse. There's a pattern here, and until there are structural changes in how religious organizations operate, how leadership is held accountable, how money is tracked, this will keep happening. Bill Gaither might be the most famous recent case, but he's not the first and probably won't be the last. What makes this particularly heartbreaking is thinking about the genuine good that happened alongside the alleged fraud. Gaither's songs have comforted people in hospitals, hospices, and funerals. His music has been the soundtrack to countless moments of faith and spiritual awakening. Does that good get erased? Can we acknowledge both truths simultaneously? That someone can create beauty and meaning while also being deeply flawed? These are questions without easy answers. The legacy of Bill Gaither is now forever complicated, forever tainted. Future generations will study his music in the context of this scandal, unable to separate the art from the artist. And that might be the most lasting consequence. Not the prison time or financial penalties, but the permanent asterisk next to his name in gospel music history. This story isn't over. It's still unfolding, still revealing new layers, still forcing difficult conversations about faith, money, accountability, and what we do when our heroes fall. So, what do you think about this entire situation? Should Bill Gaither face the full 5 years? Or does his lifetime of ministry work deserve some consideration? And here's the bigger question. How do we protect ourselves from trusting leaders who might be using our faith against us? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story shocked you as much as it shocked me, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this case is still developing, and I'll be bringing you every major update as it unfolds. The truth is stranger than anyone imagined.